Thank you for the welcome. And yeah, I looked at my notes. You gave me a call a couple of months ago. Told me what you wanted me to do today. The first thing was welcome people to Scotland, which, if you can tell from my accent, sounds a bit of a funny thing. Can anyone guess what part of Scotland I come from my accent? When I say I'm from down south, I really mean it. So I'm from Melbourne, Australia originally. I've been in the UK about 7 years, and that's probably a city about as far from Dundee as you can get. And it's great to be here with you all today, because the one thing the environment needs more than anything else is innovation or transformation. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how we're thinking about that as SEPA, because for me, in my experience in working with people around the world who've successfully transformed things, I haven't seen many people who've done that without being involved in partnerships. There are some people who can transform things on their own. I went to Sir Isaac Newton's house in Lincolnshire a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday with my wife, where he invented differential calculus and the 3 laws of physics, etc. Okay, pretty much did that on his own, but most transformation and most innovation involves partnerships. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of what I've experienced around the world. And the key reason that someone running an environment protection agency anywhere in the world needs to talk about transformation and innovation is this slide. So if everyone in the world lived like people in Scotland, we would need 3 planets. Does anyone know how many we have? Yeah. So last night I was having a drink with Dr. Mathis Fakkenagel, one of the 2 inventors of the ecological footprint and now president of the Global Footprint Network. He's over from California. I've worked with Mathis for 15 years. And he's here to help us work with the City of Stirling in particular about, with their city deal, how can they build a successful future, not blow 500 or 600 million building what we've always built, not just physically, but in terms of how they spend that money to create a very different future. We're heading in the wrong direction. The country I come from is up near 5 planets. Australia used to be very good at sport. We used to win lots of things. We now come below the UK in the Olympics. That's like a national disgrace. But we're very competitive. We have to win at something, at least overusing natural resources. We're winning at something. That's really awful, particularly in swimming. Like, I ran the Northern Ireland Environment Agency before I came here, and I got there November the 12th, 2012. And in December, I literally hadn't seen a bit of blue sky for the first 4 weeks. And someone brought me the bathing water results. He said, "Oh, bad news, boss. Some of our beaches, it's not very good to swim at." And I'm sitting there thinking, why do you lunatics want to swim in the waters? It wasn't the public position we put out. This is being recorded. I just remembered this is being recorded, isn't it? But we're all heading in the wrong direction. There isn't a country that has reversed its use of the planet yet. And so if you think about that simple scientific fact, Scotland at 3 planets, the country I come from at 5, at the moment the world is at 1.7. Incremental change, it's not a waste of time, but it's just nowhere near enough. We need transformational change. You don't get, actually when Mathis first measured the state of Victoria, which is where I'm from in Australia for us, we were at 4 planets. That was about 2007. And I took that result to the Environment Minister, who was Deputy Premier, and he said to me, "We're overusing the planet 4 to 1. I said, "Yep." He said, "How accurate is this?" I said, "Well, it's a new science. It's the best. So, it might be 3.7, might be 4.3, but it isn't 1, it isn't 10. He said, "How do we get back to 1? I said, "It's very simple, Deputy Premier. We just, we'll write a submission for you to take to your Cabinet colleagues. We'll shut down 75% of the state's economy. We'll get back to 1 planet. We'll create 80% unemployment." He said, "You got any other ideas?" Well, the only other idea is transformation, because none of us want to live in that sort of world where we have mass unemployment and all the social problems that go with that. What we need to do is transform our society, because there's only 2 pathways, to one that lives well within the means that 1 planet can support, or one that experiences things that probably are, unfortunately, no longer unimaginable, as we've seen in Houston in the last few days. So transformation is absolutely essential. First thing I'd say about transformation from my experience is mindset. So you cannot be involved in successful transformation unless, first of all, you transform your mind. And I'm 54, I had my birthday a couple of weeks ago, and I think this is how I think all the time. I'm always thinking about innovation and transformation. And I'm not a psychologist or sociologist or trained in anything that really is about human understanding. I'm actually trained as an economist, which is supposed to be about understanding human behaviour, but to me it's a bit more like astrology on a university campus where we think all human behaviour can be mathematically modelled. But I know that inside me, the way things have been done, what I've experienced in life is in my sort of mindset DNA, and I'm always trying to fight it. So let me give you a couple examples of a mindset for transformation. The first chief executive I worked for at the Environment Protection Authority in the state of Victoria, each state in Australia has an EPA, Dr. Brian Robinson, he was like a second father to me. Unfortunately, he passed away not long after he retired. But he ran the EPA in Victoria for 15 years, and he was originally from Belfast. Now, EPA is the core product for us, if you like. We do lots of things, but the core product is a licence or a permit for a factory or a fish farm or something like that. And they'll usually be 20, 30, 40, 50 pages, deliberately written so that no one can understand them. And Brian, at that time, we might have had 1,000 of these licences for different factories. They're all for individual factories. So you might be a company, you might have 20 or 30 of these things for individual factories. And they're all, well, they weren't inconsistent really, but they weren't easy to understand in relation to each other. And I was a middle manager, and I said, look, Brian, I think we can transform these licences and we can get them from 50 pages down to 35 and make them simpler, etc. And we were walking to a conference that he was opening, and he stopped me and he said, young man, this is 20 years ago nearly, he said, this is what a licence should be in the state of Victoria for a company, an environmental licence. He got out his driver's licence, you won't be able to see it. He said, the environment is so precious and underpins every single thing we do, you either should be qualified and trusted to use it or you shouldn't be. And if you're good enough to use it, we shouldn't have to write a 50-page document to tell you what to do. Now, about 2006, I led a major bill through Parliament for the Minister, which created corporate licensing. EPA's license individual facilities. The first place in the world, state of Victoria, to have the ability to have a corporate licence. And the first one was a water company with 26 licences for 26 different wastewater treatment plants, 224 pages in those 26 licences. We got it down to one licence and just 3 pages. And the 3 pages said just the outcomes. No more phosphorus in the river than this, no more nitrogen, no noise and odour beyond the site boundaries. And about 6 months later, I heard one of the environment manager for the company was speaking. He didn't know I'd wandered into the back of the conference because we didn't have people blocking us getting into the room, as you're doing so well. You guys should come and join a regulatory authority. It's absolutely brilliant. And he said, we gave this new licence to one of the guys working, an Australian guy was out in the bush running one of these treatment plants in his overalls, and he got this 3-page licence. They'd never given them the licences before. They used to write an interpretation document. This guy said, why didn't they tell me that's what they wanted me to do 20 years ago? I can achieve that. But we never thought to make it so simple. The great thing then was, with the CEO of the company and his board and executive, we said, well, that's compliance, so that's what you've got to do. What could you do to transform? They agreed to go carbon neutral, they agreed to do innovation in their supply chain, and there was a third major thing that they agreed to do, which I can never remember. Normally I say they agreed to do 3 things, and then I get to that, I have to say that. I didn't say that at the start, I could have got away with it, I could have said 2. So, for SEPA, what we're focusing on in our new regulatory strategy, which is called One Planet Prosperity. So that's trying to say to the people of Scotland, and in particular the people we regulate, there is only one planet. We want Scotland to be prosperous. You can only be prosperous in the long term within the means of one planet, and the long term is becoming much shorter, as we're seeing around the world. Most regulators would say their job is to get people to comply with the law. So most EPAs, you never get everyone to compliance. I don't know an EPA that's got everyone to compliance. So if you could achieve that, you'd be the only EPA in the world's history to get everybody you regulated to compliance. That's an extraordinary achievement, but it just ain't good enough. Like if we're at 3 planets, we might get Scotland, if we do that, back to 2.7. Well, that's useful, it's important, particularly important for local environmental quality. If you're living around a landfill that smells and that's awful, that's a horrible way to have to live. We need to fix that. But it won't get us anywhere near transforming Scotland into a society that can be successful within the means of one planet. So unashamedly, we want to help businesses go way beyond that and be profitable. Because the only reason you go beyond the law if you're a business, and we mainly regulate business, is if you can make money out of it. Now, in a sustainable society and economy, those businesses that use the planet as little as possible will be the ones that make money, and those that don't will go out of business, and the sooner the better. So how have we translated that? So I'm going to read to you from our 6 organisational characteristics, which sounds like I really want to sound like a government official. I'm going to read organisational characteristics. But these are designed to take a good EPA. I fought very hard to get the job. I was running the Northern Ireland Environment Agency before I came here, because I thought SEPA was one of the half dozen best in the world, and I thought it was a great opportunity, because Scotland has a history of innovation and transformation, to come and do something special in an EPA. So when I came in, I worked with the team and the board, and we developed these organisational characteristics. And I'll just briefly go through them, because for me they are about saying a good EPA can keep getting everyone up to compliance, but a great EPA can help people go further, and we need to be disciplined in how we support transformation. The first one is we will produce information and evidence that people use to make decisions. So we have a great scientific function, we have all sorts of other functions that produce information and evidence, and we work with universities and others that produce information and evidence. But we're only going to publish stuff if it helps someone in Scotland make a decision. Because if you're, I'll keep going back to it, if you're at that, then we don't have time. We've got to get on with it. So we're not going to waste time putting out information or evidence that doesn't help someone make a better decision about how to run their business, live their life, run their school. The second one, which is very specifically in line with today's event, helping people implement successful innovation, not minor improvements on business as usual. Now there's a blurb below each of these. This one says, in a world of growing population, urbanisation, inequality, climate change, etc., etc., small incremental change is important, but not sufficient to generate improvements in environmental health and well-being and sustainable economic growth. Societies constantly innovating will best rise to these challenges. We will help people to innovate in ways that create success in all these areas. So that's saying to us, we have to lift our sights up and not just be happy that we've improved something 5%. I once talked to a guy who had, in a manufacturing company, reduced costs 5%. He'd come in as the plant manager. And he told me that he never really had to write a job application after that. Because a 5% reduction in a manufacturing company is really significant. That can be the difference between success and failure, existence and non-existence. 5% improvements for that, well, we'll bank it and take it, but it's not going to lead to a prosperous, sustainable future. The third one is we'll help communities see the environment as an opportunity to create social and economic success. And that's one of the reasons is one of the worst mindset problems is, and I did this in Northern Ireland all the time, every time I spoke at a conference, every time I had a one-to-one meeting, I'd say, the problem is in the past, we have thought that the environment and the economy go like this. And you can hear it, the current President of the United States. I'm not trying to be very political, but he's probably one of the primary examples of, he says, and that's his political position, that the environment and the economy go like this, and we need, at the moment, to prioritise the economy. The only way we'll be successful is if we change our mindset so they go together. Now again, in terms of transformation, one of the points I'd make is you have to understand the society you're working in. I mentioned that Australia's a very competitive society. So I had a staff member who came up to me, she was a young graduate, and she said, look, I know we're only a small agency in a small state in a middle-level country, but I think if we do this, we could meet world's best practice. Do you think that's stretching too far? I said, let me think about it. This is about 10 years ago, and I left on her desk a photo of a guy called Ian Thorpe, who at the time was our top swimmer, Olympic swimmer, world record holder, gold medalist, on the blocks at the Olympics. I said, come and have a chat to me about your idea. And she came up and said, I've got no idea what you're trying to tell me. I said, this is Australia. Look at Ian Thorpe. No Australian sports person gets on the blocks at the Olympics and thinks, how do I slow down enough to come equal first? Winning a silver medal in Australia at the Olympics, it's not a shame, it's not disappointment, but seriously, we are so competitive at sport that winning is the only thing that matters. So in that context, we drove everything about how do we be best in the world, first in the world. When I went to Northern Ireland, the reason I did this about the environment, the economy, saying that's the old way of thinking, we need to do this with the environment and the economy, was in Northern Ireland, because of the conflict over, it's actually about 300 or 400 years, saying to people, this is the past, this needs to be the future, resonates. And I just translated it into environment and economy and said, how do we work on transformation by partnering? In Scotland, when I first did this stuff with the board, I had us, SEPA's going to be the first EPA in the world to do this stuff. And a few of them said, that's not a very Scottish thing to say. Aussie. And I thought about it, thought, well, what does Scotland, what connects with this society? And it is, as we heard this morning, that tradition of world-class innovation, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, etc. And some of the things which, a few of them I knew about Dundee, but some of them I didn't. And so we have said we will be a world-class EPA because that resonates with our staff and our partners and stakeholders. So again, in transformation, you have to think about whether it's the nation you're working in, the organisation, what's the culture, and how do you change that mindset so that it fits in with the culture and allows people to move forward in big steps, not small steps. The fourth one is routinely interacting with regulated businesses through their boardrooms, executive teams and owners. So traditionally we deal with plant managers, environment managers, and we will do, and they'll often have the best ideas. But they can do things about the plant. They can't decide what products are produced. They can't decide what happens through supply chains. It's the people in the boardrooms and the executive rooms. So we need to get high up in organisations. Not just high up, but we need to get to the people who make the big decisions because, you'll get sick of me doing this, big decisions are needed to tackle this. An organisation that people are clamouring to work for is the fifth one. You wouldn't clamour to work for an organisation where you couldn't do the absolute best you could, where you couldn't walk in the door in the morning and think, I don't have to change who I am. This is a place where I can come and be who I am and the best I can be, and the best you can be is someone working on innovation and transformation. And the final one is using partnerships as our principal way of delivering outcomes. So as I said at the start, you're really not going to be successful in transformation many times if you just try and do it yourself. So those are characteristics. All organisations have something like that, but I've tried to explain why for us they're important in driving how we can help with transformation. And we use them to make decisions. So people say, oh, I've got this bit of evidence information. It's a quick thing. Is it going to help someone make a better decision? Can't really see how. Well, then don't produce it. Get on, produce something that will. Two final things I want to talk about. And that thumbs up means how many minutes? One, okay. Is business innovation. So that's the CEO of a company called Superglass. That used to be one of the worst performing environmental companies in Scotland. Didn't meet any of our standards. It's in Stirling. New management came in, Ken is the MD. They completely transformed it. We're about to close them down with a health and safety executive. They were so bad. They said, what have we got to do? Over the last couple of years, they have massively improved their environmental performance. They are now fully compliant, and they've signed Scotland's first Sustainable Growth Agreement, which is a new tool we have, to talk about how they're going to go way further. The environment, if you think about that, in Stirling, a manufacturer employing, I think it's about 150 people, most people would have said to us, don't go hard on their environmental performance because they're almost on the verge of shutting down. They were losing money. They now think the environment, massively improving their performance, is one of the things that saved them as a business and is now something that will drive them to be highly profitable. So they've become so successful, they've been bought by overseas investors, there's new money coming in. Ken's been promoted in the new holding company to be Managing Director of the European and North American business. That's success from transformation, and it came from their mindset, we're not going to see the environment as a problem that stops us, we're going to see it as an opportunity that will help us be successful. So I hope by sharing some of those insights into what I've seen in a couple of places that it gives you an idea of how transformation from an EPA's point of view can and should happen. And I look forward to participating with you over the rest of the day. Thank you.